Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to Conversations Daily News. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. We, of course, have your news headlines coming up on this Tuesday with a message from my book, Words I Choose to Live By. And in today's Entertainment Spotlight, you'll be part of my conversation with filmmaker Dan Krauss discussing his new documentary on Netflix called The Anthrax Attacks. Enjoy today's broadcast. For Conversations Daily News, I'm Cyrus Webb with your Tuesday headlines. In international news, Queen Elizabeth II mourned by Britain and world at funeral. The United Kingdom and the world bade farewell to Queen Elizabeth II on Monday with a state funeral that drew presidents and kings, princes and prime ministers, and crowds in the streets of London and at Windsor Castle to honor a monarch whose 70-year reign defined an age. In a country known for pomp and pageantry, the first state funeral since Winston Churchill's was filled with spectacle. Before the service, a bell tolled 96 times, once a minute for each year of Elizabeth's life. Then 142 Royal Navy sailors used ropes to draw the gun carriage carrying her flag-draped coffin to Westminster Abbey, where pallbearers carried it inside, and about 2,000 people, ranging from world leaders to healthcare workers, gathered to mourn. The trappings of state and monarchy abounded. The coffin was draped with the royal standard, and atop it was the imperial state crown, sparkling with almost 3,000 diamonds, and the sovereign's orb and scepter. But the personal was also present. The coffin was followed into the church by generations of Elizabeth's descendants, including King Charles III, heir to the throne, Prince William, and 9-year-old George, who is second in line. On a wreath atop the coffin, a handwritten note read, "In loving and devoted memory," and was signed Charles R. for Rex or King. Here, where Queen Elizabeth was married and crowned, we gather from across the nation, from the Commonwealth, and from the nations of the world, to mourn our loss, to remember her long life of selfless service, and ensure confidence to commit her to the mercy of God, our Maker and Redeemer. The Dean of the Medieval Abbey told the mourners. The service ended with 2 minutes of silence observed across the United Kingdom, after which the attendees sang the national anthem, now titled God Save the King. The day began early, with the doors of Parliament's 900-year-old Westminster Hall were closed to mourners after hundreds of thousands had filed in front of her coffin. Monday was declared a public holiday in honor of Elizabeth, who died September the 8th, and hundreds of thousands of people descended on central London to witness history. In more international news, a day after blackout, Fiona dumps more rain on Puerto Rico. Hurricane Fiona unleashed more rain on Puerto Rico on Monday, a day after the storm knocked out power and water to most of the island, and National Guard troops rescued hundreds of people who got stranded. The governor warned that it could take days to get the lights back on. The blow from Fiona was made more devastating because Puerto Rico has yet to recover from Hurricane Maria, which killed nearly 3,000 people and destroyed the power grid in 2017. 5 years later, more than 3,000 homes on the island are still covered by blue tarps. The storm stripped pavements from roads, tore off roofs, and sent torrents pouring into homes. It also took out a bridge and flooded 2 airports. Authorities reported 1 death from the hurricane, a man swept away by a flooded river in one of the inland towns. Puerto Rican officials said it was too early to know the full scope of damage. The storm was still expected to dump up to 15 inches of rain in some places as it spun away from the U.S. territory that is home to 3.2 million people. In more international news, Ukraine warns of nuclear terrorism after strike near plant. A Russian missile blasted a crater close to a nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine on Monday, damaging nearby industrial equipment but not hitting its 3 reactors. Ukrainian authorities denounced the move as an act of nuclear terrorism. The missile struck within 300 meters or 328 yards of the reactors at the South Ukraine nuclear power plant near one of the provinces, leaving a hole 2 meters or 6.5 feet deep, according to a Ukrainian nuclear operator. The reactors were operating normally, and no employees were injured. In national news, lawsuit seeks repairs to troubled Mississippi water system. A new class action lawsuit seeks to force Mississippi's capital city to fix its troubled water system, including removal or repair of pipes and equipment contaminated with lead. The suit was filed last Friday in federal district court, a day after the state health department told people in Jackson that they no longer had to boil water before drinking it or using it to brush their teeth. We are striving to secure clean, safe water for the Jackson community, a community that has been suffering with contaminated water for years, one of the attorneys who filed the suit, Robert Gibbs, said in a statement on Monday. This is a righteous fight, and one we intend to win. And finally, in business news, U.S. stocks rise ahead of expected interest rate hike by Fed. Stocks closed higher on Wall Street after swaying between small gains and losses much of the day on Monday as investors braced for another big interest rate increase this week from the Fed Reserve. The S&P 500 rose 0.7% on Monday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the Nasdaq also gained ground. Cyrus Webb, Conversations Daily News. It's now time for a message from my book, Words I Choose to Live By. Enjoy. Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm Cyrus Webb, and welcome to Words I Choose to Live By. There will come a point in life when you have to go from just talking about it to being about it. Change doesn't happen with just thoughts. To see results, you have to choose to act. Have an amazing Tuesday. Filmmaker Dan Krauss is featured in today's Entertainment Spotlight right here on Conversation Daily News. For Conversation Daily News, I'm Cyrus Webb with Entertainment Spotlight. Filmmaker Dan Krauss joined me on Conversations Live, the radio show, to talk about his new documentary, The Anthrax Attacks, on Netflix. Here's a bit of our conversation. What has it been like for you, Dan, to see the response to the Anthrax Attacks so far?
It is interesting. I think the most common response I get is that people have forgotten completely that this even happened, and also that it was an attack from within and not the work of foreign terrorists. I think a lot of people who lived through that time, myself included, had filed the anthrax attacks under the general heading of foreign terrorism. And it's only looking back and re-examining that time that you remember that this was a domestic attack, according to the FBI, and not the act of foreign terrorism. So it's been sort of a fascinating experience to go back to a time that I remember as just a blur of chaos and fear, and sort of pick it apart and remember all the details that I had forgotten about just what a strange time it was.
And I think, too, again, and it's so interesting to hear you say that, Dan, because it's interesting, too, as I was talking to some people about my speaking with you, some of them had forgotten, even though they were alive at the time, had forgotten about, the anthrax attacks that were going on and what was being thought of at the time, and then, of course, what kind of unfolded. Was that kind of the why for you in wanting to do this documentary?
It was a big part of the why, yeah. I had forgotten how bizarre this story was and how expansive the investigation that followed it was as well. I mean, it was a 7-year journey to determine who was responsible for these attacks, and the largest investigation in FBI's history. Cyrus Webb, Conversations Daily News. We thank you all for tuning into this edition of Conversation Daily News. We'll be back to you guys on tomorrow with more news, message from my book, Words I Choose to Live By, and of course your Entertainment Spotlight. Until then, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversation Daily News today, and let's go make it a great one.